Here's the hard life lessons learned from living inside of a fixer-upper. Imagine realizing that for the same cost as living in a cramped apartment, you could buy your own private home with way more space and a big backyard, and even pay less by renting out a portion of that house to offset your mortgage. That's exactly what I discovered when my wife and I decided to stop renting and to move into a rough and ready house that we can fix up, rent the basement out, offset our mortgage, and build some equity. This is commonly called as a BRRRR project. BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. It's a common strategy in real estate investing to go into a property that needs a little bit of love, increase the value of that by rehabbing it, get a renter in there to offset that mortgage price, and then refinance the house because now it's worth more and you can grab some of that money, and then repeat. It sounded pretty straightforward to us, but trust me when I tell you, my wife and I learned a lot of lessons from living inside of a construction zone to unexpected repairs and all of the little things that you might not think about. So stick around through this video because we're going to do a deep dive into exactly what you should know ahead of time before thinking about living inside of a flip and fix project. Okay, so a little bit of a backstory. We're living in an apartment and I start getting just really frustrated with all of the noise above me from rowdy neighbors and dogs, not having the freedom to do what I want, not having a garage, our car potentially getting broken into, which actually did happen multiple times. And I just thought there had to be a better way for us to live and buy a home, but it seemed like a far-fetched reality to us at the time. That's when it clicked for me, is when I heard about the BRRRR strategy and having a renter offset some of that mortgage cost. Now all of a sudden it became a lot more realistic for me to be able to actually afford to pay a mortgage payment compared to the rent. And in my personal case, the rent was actually more expensive than my mortgage payment ended up to be. And here's how we did it. First task for us was finding the property that fit the bill. What I mean by that is we're looking for properties that have a separate entrance, some privacy to be able to have that renter not a part of our everyday life. Some people are okay with renting per room and having that stranger in your own personal space, but I knew for my wife and I, that just wasn't going to cut it for us. So when we looked for properties, we found properties that had a separate entrance into the backyard or maybe the side of the house that went straight into the basement. And this could be closed off from the upstairs. So the upstairs essentially became its own private unit and the downstairs became its own private unit. The benefit of doing this compared to buying a duplex or a triplex or fourplex is that single family homes come with better rates, lower down payments, and offer me a lot more financing benefits than a duplex. And essentially we're turning a single family home into a duplex. My wife and I found the perfect property, but it was on the high side of our budget, around $600,000, which seems insane for a first-time home. For us, that came with a big mortgage price tag. But when you broke down the math of what I knew I could get for the market value of rent and how quickly I could move that renter into there, then it started becoming a lot more possible for us to afford that payment. Not only did this specific property have a separate entrance to the basement, but it also had a full kitchen in the basement, along with 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and about 1,200 square feet. In Colorado, in the Denver area, next to a hospital, I knew I could reasonably rent this out for about $2,000 a month. That is a huge savings when it comes to offsetting my mortgage. But even with this huge rental opportunity, I knew the $600K price tag was going to come with a few hardships. Luckily, I was able to negotiate seller concessions to help pay for a lot of my closing costs, as well as have the seller fix and repair some needed things in that property. And probably part of the reason why that home sat on the market for so long, I was able to negotiate them to fix that and have that cost out of their pocket and not mine. For tips and tricks on how to negotiate properly and what renovations actually get the most bang for your buck, check out the free PDF version below of a checklist of exactly what renovations you should consider doing and the value they can add for your project. So here's a big lesson we learned early. Don't shy away from a high price tag. If the bottom line numbers work out, then it's okay if the higher price property than you thought you might want to do is still going to fit for your specific investment purposes. But obviously it's important to know that you can actually get pre-approved and qualified for that high purchase price. Overall, the layout of this home for us was perfect. It allowed us to keep the privacy we were missing in our cramped apartment. It gave us more space, a big spacious backyard, and a quality of life we wanted. And at the end of the day, our personal payment was less than the rent that we were paying in that small cramped apartment. My wife and I got under contract and bought the property. So here are the first key renovations we did to the basement first to make sure we got a renter in there as soon as possible. Luckily for us, the basement was in pretty good shape. It was decently rental ready already. All we had to do was throw on some paint on the walls, maybe fix a few chips and some baseboards, and replace a lighting fixture. Other than that, we now need to worry about furnishing the place so we can look for medium-term renters like traveling nurses and medical professionals that are willing to pay a slightly higher rent amount in order to have furniture and things that they don't need to move with them. Most of our furniture that we got for our first rental was found on Facebook Marketplace or IKEA, the cheap end of side of things, and honestly, a lot of it was even free. So there's a ton of good deals you can do on used furniture out there that don't break the budget and can help you get rental income coming in quicker. The entire process from purchase to the light renovations to furnishing the unit itself and getting a renter in it surprisingly only took 45 days. Now that is what is called a tenant vacancy and things that can be considered in your budget. We knew that that unit was going to be vacant for the beginning of that, and that extra cost of the mortgage during that time is something we have to consider. Not many people know this, but you don't have to pay the mortgage at all for that first month. When you buy a property, the day you close, that first mortgage monthly payment is skipped, and you're actually going to pay that first mortgage on the second month. This was huge for us. It allowed us to furnish the place, do the light renovations, and get a tenant secured in there before we even have to start paying our mortgage. So right off the bat, the first mortgage payment we had was already offset by that tenant. Now with the basement, repairs finished, tenant in it, we set our sights on the upstairs renovations. Now the upstairs was a little bit more rough than the downstairs, and we knew this going into it. The key was we got rental income right away, so we had more time to fix the things needed upstairs in the space that my wife and I were living in. So now we have our upstairs kitchen renovated, our downstairs rented out, and tenants in it. But here's what we quickly learned the downsides were about being landlords. We became extremely conscientious of the people living below us. In the early mornings, we're creeping around, trying to be quiet, trying to be polite. There might be random noises in the middle of the night, fights, arguments that people living downstairs might have. The noise and the consideration of others is definitely something that people don't talk about enough when talking about house hacking and BRRRR methods and the pros and cons about it. So if you're looking to go about this strategy, absolutely, it can save you a lot of money and help you grow your wealth and your income over time. But just know that that does come with pros and cons. Don't get me wrong. Overall, our tenants have been great, and we've been extremely fortunate to have no major issues with renting out our properties or tenant issues or people causing havoc in our rents. I think there are a lot of horror stories out there that talk about what damages and problems tenants can cause, and truly none of those are that common. Especially with midterm rentals, these are traveling medical professionals anyways. They're usually very professional. They're in their careers, so they're working a lot and hardly ever home. Plus, they usually get a stipend from their hospital that allows them to be comfortable with a little bit more higher of a payment than other people might pay for that same property. So far, we bought a property, renovated it, and rented it out. So how do you know when it's time to refinance and repeat? My wife and I, when we first bought the home, had to do a very unconventional loan, an asset utilization loan with a non-occupying co-borrower to even buy the property. So we started with 10% down. The reason why we had to get this weird non-conventional loan is because I couldn't personally count my income yet, being 100% commission. Luckily, 6 months into purchasing was the 2-year mark date that I could start counting that commission income. So 6 months later, which is the soonest that I could possibly refinance, I was able to refinance my wife's dad off of the loan so he doesn't have that liability attached to him anymore. And we were able to actually get a much better rate than the weird non-conventional rate that we were at and into a conventional rate. After we refinanced, we also realized that we had a decent amount of equity saved up from the renovations that we did and improving the value of the home. The best part about this was we were able to take that equity that we had gained from those renovations and improving the property and get a HELOC on it, a home equity line of credit. That home equity line of credit allowed us the down payment for our next property. And of course, we repeated the same exact process. We found a property that had a separate entrance basement, that had a kitchen in the basement, that we were able to rent out right away to offset that mortgage. And we just started this entire process again. Within the span of 1 year, we were able to buy a property, renovate it, rent it out, refinance it, and actually get a HELOC and use that HELOC to buy another property to repeat the process. And that is what BRRRR is all about. Looking through this entire process, doing a BRRRR project or house hacking or living in a flip and fix was one of the best financial decisions my wife and I ever made. Not only were we able to stop wasting our money on rent and start putting that into equity instead, we were able to gain more equity by doing the work ourselves and improving the home. We were able to get somebody else to help pay down our loan. And over the time of that year, our house was appreciating in cost. But through that process, we learned how to do a lot of skills ourselves. We learned how to be landlords and manage tenants. We learned about new financing opportunities for renovation loans, and we increased our net worth. Now we have 2 properties, 3 rentals, and are living essentially rent-free. If you're looking to do something like this, my biggest piece of advice would be to talk to somebody who's already gone through it. Reach out to me, call me, comment, reach out in my DMs, and ask me about these personal trials and tribulations that my wife went through so I can help you save the headache of doing it yourself. In fact, down below, I have a completely free PDF version for you that can help show you exactly what renovations cost what and what value you might expect them to add. So you can see the top bang for your buck when it comes to spending your money on renovation and making sure you gain value in that house for it. If this interests you, grab the PDF below. I hope it gains a lot of value for you as you're looking to do your own live-in BRRRR. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and as always, if you're looking to grow for generational wealth and achieve financial freedom, follow me.